A lot of people have referred to Country Coach as the world's finest motorhome. Today we're hanging out with Louie here at Premier RV of Oregon. Louie, you know a couple things about Country Coach, I heard.
A little bit, yeah. I started in '96, so I know a little bit.
I think your slogan was the finest motor coach in the world. Do you think that's true? And do you think you could back that up?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a little biased, but I definitely think that they're one of the best built RVs that are fiberglass, not competing with Prevos or a Newell or anything like that. But from a construction standpoint, fit and finish, they're really hard to beat. Country was designed for safety and then function and then design. So they really went after the important parts, and that starts with the chassis. They really wanted to overbuild the chassis extremely more than a lot of the other manufacturers. So they would use bigger suspension components. They would use a semi-monocoque chassis, which basically is using a bridge construction down below rather than using raised rails and hanging everything off of it. So with that being said, yeah, I think their construction and what they did as far as a build structure is second to none.
So can you show us some of these differences that's gonna make Country Coach different than other RVs?
Yeah, actually, I have something inside here that will make it a lot easier for me to explain some of the differences.
Yeah, sounds good. And this is a beautiful 04 Magna here. I love this paint job. Is this coach available right now?
Yeah, it sure is. A 2004 Country Coach Magna. Pretty low miles from what I remember. It's got 72,273 miles. It's got the big Cat C15.
Wow, this is probably a rocket. That's got to be over 500 horsepower, isn't it?
This is probably the best power to weight ratio coach out there. I don't know if anything can compete with this. We'll have to do 0 to 60 a little bit later on this.
Hey, I like that idea. Yeah, all kinds of beautiful Country Coaches coming and going, and this Magna is something special. And I think Louie's got something cool to show us inside of this coach.
Yeah, I took this off my wall to kind of show you what the chassis is all about for the Country Coach. They built their own chassis. They started in like 96, possibly 95 on the Allures. And it's called the DynoMax. And it's a semi-monocoque chassis. And when Country Coach was designing this, they wanted to mimic and get as close to a ride as, you know, like a Prevo or a Newell. So what they did is they did a lot of, Country was also a Prevo conversion manufacturer, so.
And you guys were converting a lot of Prevos at one point. What's the most Prevos a year Country was converting?
I'm pretty sure they did a little bit more than 50, and I think it was in the 2000 range era.
So I think they were the leader in the Prevo industry in that era.
Marathon might have been pretty close, maybe a little bit more, but it was, I think Marathon did a couple more, but. Yeah.
I'm always a fan of the Countries, but yeah, all good. Yeah, so, well, I'm sure you guys learned a lot by converting those Prevos, but.
They did, because if you've ever driven one of those coaches, you know the difference, because they drive so much better than anything else out there on the road. Now, Countries drive really, really good, and I think they're as close to the Newell and the Prevo as you're going to get. And the benefit is obviously that it's a semi-monocoque chassis. And basically what that means is that you're building these little angled steel truss systems type down below. So you're building this whole box and then welding it to the front suspension into the rear. And with that being said is that your weight's being distributed all the way under here rather than hanging everything off the two rails like a raised rail chassis. Raised rail chassis just hang everything off of those center rails.
Yeah, so those are the two center rails like we would see on the raised rail chassis, and all this is extra, what Country Coach does?
Mm-hmm. So all this, and what that's doing is eliminating that twist and inflection, which you don't want in a motorhome, because that does a lot of stress. You know, you're on an earthquake every single day driving down the road, and you know, that's going to do a lot of stress on the motorhome. So that's the benefit of a semi-monocoque chassis.
Yes, sir. And then I'm noticing all of this metal construction. Is this all steel construction?
Yeah, good point. And Country Coach is one of the only manufacturers that does steel on the side walls and up on the ceiling of the roof. So this floor right here is going to be 2.5 inches thick. It's going to be laminated. It's going to set on top of the chassis, and then the side wall is going to be welded to the coach. No one welds side walls to the coach. They actually bolt them on because they're dissimilar metal. You can't weld aluminum to steel. So by using the steel, they could build this what we call cradle of steel, and to give you a lot more integrity and a lot more strength. If you ever were in a circumstance that you're in an accident, country coaches are better than anything, really. Maybe a bus or a renewal, but these are really, really good. And you can notice the firewall up front here. All the steel that you have of this protection, your impact is going to be right here. It's not going to get past the driver and passenger seats. In fact, we had a driver that went to an RV show in Iowa. I think it was like 2004 or 6 or whatever it was. And one of our drivers was in a fog bank and he didn't see a truck in front of him and he never applied the brakes and he was going about 40 miles an hour. He walked out the front door. And we had that coach in the display to show people this is how chassis are built. I mean, it was a really good selling feature for us.
Yes, sir. And a lot of what makes these coaches so great is what we can't see, but there's also a lot of stuff that we can see. Do you think you could show us some more of the stuff that makes Country Coach different?
Oh yeah, you know, like the steel right up here.
Yeah.
You know, above the windshield, giving that integrity to the windshield and everything else. But yeah, the side walls and the top of the coach being all steel is really, and what the cool thing about Country Coach is on all their models, from the Tributes to the Inspires to the Allures to the Intrigues, the Magnas, the Affinities, they all shared a semi-monocoque chassis. So the cool thing about Country Coach is they built high-end coaches. They were first start building, you know, Magnas and Affinities way back when in the 90s. And then they brought in the Intrigue in 1995 and then the Allure in 1996. What did they do with those coaches? They didn't know how to build raised rail chassis. They did semi-monocoque. So that really, really tells you the difference of the quality of the build.
Yes, sir. What's some of the other things that separate Country Coach?
The finish work, what they do, even in the bays down below, is the carpet. It looks so good. It's all wrapped around. Everything's finished in that sense. You can see one of the bolts right there. There's 50 of those 5-inch carriage bolts that bolts the floor down to the coach.
Really?
That's the 2.5-inch thick floor that's bolted to the chassis. It goes right through the rails and everything of the coach. You used to see those guys just hammer these bolts into the coach. It was kind of cool when I used to do the factory tours, and that's how the floor is set, and then of course the sidewalls welded. If you look at all the colored bolts, they used to, when they torqued everything on the suspension and the whole chassis, you'd see a yellow mark and a white mark. That was 2 different people torquing every single nut on this coach. So that was the inspections that they did.
Nice.
Yeah.
And then the bay door is different than anything else?
Well, on the Magnas, the Intrigues up, basically, you're going to see fiberglass doors instead of aluminum. The Allure being the entry level would have aluminum, and so would the Inspire. You know, that's not that big of a deal from the sense of someone buying it. What they're buying is the chassis. So when you could get a entry-level coach that has a semi-monocoque chassis with independent front suspension, that really separates this quality build versus a lot of the other brands.
What else makes Country Coach great?
Well, again, it started from the top. You know, Bob was an incredible man, and he really surrounded himself with a lot of good people. The employees were probably the big part of building these coaches, and Country Coach had some of the best. I mean, everyone's really, when I used to do the tours, you could really tell people cared on what they were doing, and I used to get that comment from a lot of people that would go on other tours, and then they would come to Country Coaches, and they just seemed like they would see that people just cared a lot more. They weren't running around, because the line rolls, you know, like a lot of other brands, are every 2 hours. In this plant, the line roll, so when it went from one station to the next, was a day and a half. So you didn't see people scattered and running around looking for a part or whatever. Everything was in a really controlled environment, and I really think that made the big difference. When you walk through this showroom, you would see it was as clean as it is today. I mean, these floors were immaculate. When they were done with the station a coach went down, they would all sweep up, clean up. So it was all about the pride of making everything finished. And it really went a long way, and I think it started with Bob, because he was the creator of Country Coach, you know?
Yes, sir, and we're here at Premier RV of Oregon, which is in the old, this was the Plant 10 facility where the Affinities and the Magnas were built?
Yes.
So this 07 Magna that is available, probably won't be available for long, but and this Affinity back here, both of these coaches were built in this room?
Yeah, this was both of them were built in this. This is a service coach that we're doing some work on. We're doing a big remodel job. But yeah, you would have 2 line rolls coming right down here. Chassis would come down there, and that's what the cranes were for. They would actually lift up the side walls and the floors and the ceiling of the coach, and then they would put the cabinets into place, and then come down to here. This would be wiring, and then they would come here and put the front cap and rear cap on, and then it would go to paint and then come back this way. Pretty cool. There's a lot of great memories here, but the construction and the processes of Country Coach are really second to nothing.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of pride here in Lane County, Oregon, a lot of incredible craftsmen here, but what else makes Country Coach different?
Boy, you got to get to the roof. The roof's got to be important, right? The foundation's really important, but the roof is also another important part. And you'll see here that it's a one-piece roof, so there's no reason to seam it and seal it every year. Being one piece, it joined it right below the windshield right there on the side of it. Being one piece, that you're just eliminating a lot more chances of leaks. And then, of course, the ceiling on the Country Coaches were 5.5 inch thick of insulated material, and then you would have your roof on top of it, which is just more of a protection from the elements, but your insulation and everything like that was in the ceiling. And they were a vacuum bonded ceiling with a lot of R factors in it. So.
And I hear over and over your cabinets are really something.
Countries were really well known for a lot of things, but the cabinets were pretty incredible.
Let's go peek inside this Magna real quick. And what's different about these cabinets than some of the other motorhomes out there?
Well, the cool thing is it's all solid wood, so you don't see a lot of that anymore. It's all 3/4 inch. It's not a veneer piece, so when you start knocking and stuff like that on walls, you're going to get a lot of thickness and a lot of strength. And then, of course, the radius right here on this custom cabinet. A lot of manufacturers, the simpler way would just to bring it down and then build underneath it. Time equals money, but that takes a lot of time for someone to come in here and sand this down. And the attention to detail, you see the curves here on the walls. Most manufacturers would have it straight instead of a curved wall. So yeah, I think the cabinets, this is medium cherry. I think they had 250 employees at the one time that built cabinets at Country Coach.
Wow.
They had about 1,700 employees, so the wood was an important part of the build process at Country Coach.
What about the Country Coach slide rooms compared to other coaches?
There's a couple different ones. On the entry levels, you're going to see more of an electric slide. On the Magnas Affinities, because they're carrying a lot more weight, they're going to see hydraulic slides, HWH, which is a really incredible slide mechanism that's been very durable.
I'm noticing here in this Magna, there's not a big gap. Sometimes some of these motorhomes have a big gap. It's almost a flat floor. This is carpeting, not quite a flat floor, but pretty close.
Yeah, so this is a flat floor slide. So it kind of comes up on a ramp when it comes in. It comes up on a little molly strip like that. And then it comes inside the coach to protect it from the carpet and tile so it doesn't leave any marks. But yeah, it's a HWH, very heavy duty, and being a flat floor makes a big difference from what you could do on this side of the coach. You could change the seating. A lot of people say, well, that coach doesn't have what I want. All these things are changeable. So I could put a sofa here if I wanted. If it had a sofa, I could take it out and put a computer table and a recliner. And that's something that we do a lot of because we got all the employees that used to work at Country Coach, and we could do any of that work here.
How about the drivability of a Country Coach?
Countries are really, they're a nice soft ride. People always ask me what's the difference between this and a lot of the other ones. Country Coach uses a larger suspension bag, and with that being said, that gives us that softer ride. It also allows us to level the coach without using jacks or anything like that. It's all automated. All you do is you push this button twice and it will level the whole motorhome. So it's very user-friendly, very easy. You have 7 inches of travel. You have 4 down, 3 up, so that gives you enough room to level a coach at RV parks. The other big benefit, I think, is obviously that Country Coach uses independent front suspension from 2000 to the newer coaches. And with that, like this coach, this 07 Magna, it's got a 55-degree wheel cut. So that allows you the maneuverability to get you in and out of places. In fact, on this coach, I could drive it right out here. I'd cut out this way a little bit, and I could go right down the center, and people would go, "You're crazy, there's no way." Well, I park these a lot, and I'm telling you, you could do that on this coach.
Yeah.
So the maneuverability, it really helps whoever is operating it to have total control of the coach and to get into places where they never thought they could. And the other thing that they do is they have all the country coaches, if it has a tag axle, it's going to be liftable. It's going to be air and it's going to lift up off the ground. It doesn't have to lift up too much off the ground, and what you're just trying to do is to get the weight off of it so you don't scuff the wheels. Yeah, I mean, I drive a lot of motorhomes, and they're not all country coaches. I drive all different brands. And I'll tell you the biggest difference that separates country coach from anything else, and it's hard to explain until you drive like a Prevost or anything like that, but you're going to feel the weight. It's just a more solid, heavy-duty suspension system. So when you're going over those bumps in California or Louisiana and all those places where you're, going through the highways and stuff, this coach does really, really well. And it's going to give you that softer, luxury ride that you're going to be looking for.
Well, Louis, I always appreciate you sharing a wealth of information and definitely a lot of value in the country coach product. Now, if someone is a serious buyer and they want to purchase one of the country coaches you have for sale here or one of the other coaches you have for sale here at Premier RV of Oregon, who should they get a hold of?
You can definitely call me, Louis, or Damon at 541-998-2640.
And you guys also do service work, storage, remodels. You do it all?
We have 80 coaches in storage. We do a ton of service work. I mean, people come from all over the country to come here to do remodels. We have a great video on that. And then, of course, we sell about 80 to 85 country coaches a year and other brands, actually. So we're always looking for inventory. So if you're in the market to sell your coach, we would love the opportunity to sell it for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And you guys have a YouTube channel going too as well. If you guys can make sure to subscribe, I'll leave a link in the description below. Louis, I greatly appreciate you sharing all that wisdom. I also greatly appreciate all of you out there subscribing to the channel and subscribing to Premier's channel as well. I hope you're all having a great day. Thanks again.
All right, thanks.